People often message me and ask why I don't show my face. Well, here it is. I have nothing to hide. That's me on the left, when the Kool-Aid was fresh and flowing. I used to drink me a cup every morning before my shift started. But soon after, the Kool-Aid dried up, and I saw the bottom of the cup. And I didn't like what I saw, so I retired. And that's that. Now you'll see in this video why I retired and how corrupt the police really are.
Okay, let's talk about education. Grade 12 is the minimum requirement. Okay, now we're going to talk about lifestyle and life experience. Pete, what do you think are some of the things that someone should think about when they're applying to the OPP when we're thinking about their lifestyle?
I would think that somebody's lifestyle should reflect the values of the OPP.
Joining us, an OPP officer is facing charges after allegedly entering the home her ex-boyfriend was in. She's now accused of assaulting his girlfriend inside the house while on duty. This happened more than a year ago. CTV's Mike Arcelides brings us the details.
It was 15 minutes of terror. It was very scary. She was in full uniform, hand on her weapon most of the time.
For more than a year, Chantel Stamkos and her family say they've lived in fear, afraid for their safety and of potential retaliation by a female police officer who allegedly entered their home using the door's keypad and confronted Stamkos and her partner, a man the female officer used to date.
We, at one point, had said, if you don't leave, we're going to have to call the police. And she said, I am the police.
All right, speaking about special skills now, that really could be just about anything. Pete, what are some of the special skills you've come across during your interviews?
Some of the special skills I've come across include auto mechanics, electricians, computer repair people. One of the most interesting ones was a licensed scuba diver.
Very good. Don't be afraid to put it down. Maybe you speak a different language, maybe you're a pilot. Est-ce que vous parlez français? There's no harm in putting down a special skill.
27-year OPP veteran officer Scott Anthony walked into the Huntsville courthouse with his lawyer this morning, where Anthony pleaded guilty to assault causing bodily harm in a violent arrest caught on camera July 10, 2022 in MacTier, in which the officer is seen repeatedly striking the man with his taser and kicking him. The 30-minute surveillance video was played for the court after the Crown read an agreed statement of facts, telling the court the officer was responding to a 3 a.m. trespassing call for a man trying to hop on a CP train while it was being inspected. It was within minutes Constable Anthony arrived on scene near the rail yard and was captured on camera, deploying his taser several times on the man, before hitting him in the head while he was on the ground, then dragging him by his feet and kicking him in the head and legs. According to the agreed statement of facts, the bloody man was taken to hospital with several injuries to his head, torso, arms, and legs. The Crown said it could not prove, however, beyond a reasonable doubt, broken ribs and a punctured lung were a result of Anthony's strikes or from the man falling off the train at 16 kilometers an hour. Anthony was charged with assault causing bodily harm and one count of assault with a weapon following an SIU investigation. CTV News has also obtained this video of an incident weeks prior to the rail yard arrest. Surveillance video from inside a holding cell at the Bracebridge OPP detachment appearing to show Constable Anthony striking a man in custody repeatedly. The man later collapsed to the ground in the cell. The SIU cleared Anthony of any criminal wrongdoing this summer, saying Anthony used reasonable force and defended himself in the holding cell when the man tried to punch him. Anthony, as part of the agreed statement of facts read in court today, acknowledged he caused injuries to the face of the MacTier man and admitted that the use of his taser, along with dragging the man to the police cruiser, went against his training. The court heard Anthony at one point had been an instructor for use of force with tasers. Neither Anthony nor his...
All right, speaking of leadership, it comes in many different ways.
Absolutely. You could be a supervisor at work. You could be a coach on your sports team. You can be the person who makes sure everybody gets home after a night of activities.
One of the things with leadership is, as a police officer, when you show up at a situation, you will have to take a leadership role. You don't have a choice.
And now, a former OPP officer sentenced to 6 years in prison for sexually assaulting an unconscious woman in 2017. Jason Redmond fired from the OPP yesterday, a day before he was formally sentenced today. Here's CTV's Natalie Van Roy.
A now former OPP officer, Jason Redmond, sentenced to 6 years in prison for sexually assaulting an unconscious woman. The 43-year-old appeared in a Brockville courtroom wearing a mask and dark suit. He didn't say anything before he was brought into custody.
All right, to talk about communication skills, appropriately, we're in a training room for the provincial communication centers. Communication is 95% of policing, knowing how to get your message across, how to relay information.
I absolutely agree. I would say that many of the people we talk to are strangers we're having our first encounter with.
Security video has now been released in the case of an OPP officer who was convicted of assaulting a woman outside of a holding cell in Orillia in 2019. Constable Bailey Nichols was found guilty last month of assault causing bodily harm for choking 43-year-old Shannon Hoffman and pinning her against the bars of her cell. The video shows that after the altercation, Hoffman touched the back of her neck and blood was seen on her hand. The SIU became involved 7 months later and Nichols was charged in 2021. The judge noted Nichols was seen cleaning up the blood and removing the bloody toilet paper left behind. Court documents also reveal she then waited roughly 20 minutes to contact her supervisor and failed to complete a mandatory use of force report. The OPP says Nichols is currently on an unrelated leave.
Now, talking about employment, it goes without saying we're going to speak to every supervisor you've ever had.
We're going to want to know if they think you were reliable, if they would hire you back, if they would be a recommendation for you.
There's no such thing as a perfect candidate.
Former OPP officer Jason Redmond spent nearly 8 years on paid suspension after multiple convictions over the years, including drug trafficking and sexual assault. The constable was finally fired last summer. By then, he had already taken home more than $1.2 million in pay. Details of this Brockville case triggered public outrage. But it's just one of more than 450 cases of suspended officers CBC News found through publicly available data in Ontario.
All right, let's talk about driving. Why is driving important? First thing that comes to mind, this car says OPP and police all over it. It does go fast. We need to make sure that you can keep it between the ditches, shiny side up, without bringing disrepute to the organization.
Of a man struck and killed by an OPP officer is speaking out after a ruling that deemed her husband's death was not serious enough was thrown out. CTV's John Woodward reports.
The level of hurt and pain that I'm in, I just don't think anybody else deserves that.
Courtney Darthenay has been fighting for 3 years to do right by her late husband, Tyler Dorsick.
We both believe in standing up for what's right.
The 35-year-old was struck and killed in Midland in 2020 by an OPP cruiser driven by Constable Jamie McBain out on a coffee run.
Okay, let's talk about volunteer work. What's your thoughts on that, Pete?
Well, I believe volunteering is essential. I volunteer at my own church. I've been doing it for years now.
I used to volunteer with a youth group through church also.
Stratford, a disgraced former OPP officer, was just led away in handcuffs and taken to prison where he will spend the next 18 months behind bars for internet child luring and possessing child pornography. John Paul Stone, a 57-year-old longtime Listowel resident, pleaded guilty this past December, and a judge here in Stratford Superior Court decided this morning that 18 months in prison is appropriate. The judge acknowledged during the sentencing that Stone was himself the victim of child.
Okay, let's talk about fitness. Although all the areas of assessment are equally important, I think fitness is the one that's the most in your control.
I actually think fitness is all in your control. You decide what all of it is.
Oh no, she don't. Kenneth Pengelly was one of 3 officers told in court they're no longer facing charges in the shooting death of a toddler.
This has been and was and continues to be a horrible tragedy.
18-month-old Jamison Shapiro was shot 4 times by provincial police as they aimed at his father.